Hello, everybody. This is Sarah Scott on behalf of the Center for Hellenic Studies in Washington, D.C. I'm here with Leonard Muellner, and we're looking at some more questions and issues coming up on our forum. And the first of them is related to the Romans. Although we're looking at the ancient Greek hero, the participants asked, how different would be the ancient Roman hero? So maybe you could fill us in a little bit there, Lenny. It's a big topic.
Yes, it is a big topic, and it's a very interesting one indeed. I did post a little bit of a beginning of a response, which I'll just briefly resume, which is that if you want to understand the Roman heroes, you should start with the Greek ones, because after all, the Romans, were under, to some extent, the secondary culture to that of Greece. They became a primary culture. I don't mean to say these words in any kind of value judgmental terms, okay, but Greeks colonized Italy going back to the 8th century BCE, so they were in cultural contact for a long, long period of time, and so the founding hero of the Roman Empire, as adopted by the Emperor Augustus, who's considered, I think, the founder of the Roman Empire itself as an empire, as opposed to the Republic in its earlier stages, is the founding hero is Aeneas, who's a Trojan hero in the Iliad, and I mentioned a few interesting things about him. Like Achilles, his father was a mortal and his mother a goddess. The story of his generation is told in the Homeric hymn to Aphrodite. It's a wonderful text and very interesting. About him, that is Anchises. That's his this is the father of Aeneas, rather, Anchises, who then gets to have sex with Aphrodite herself, and the product of this birth is Aeneas. His genealogy is comparable to Achilles, and there's one line in the Iliad, in book 13. I cited it in the comment that I wrote, where it said that he has Manus, the same kind of special anger as Achilles has, against Priam, but we have no more understanding of what the cause of it or the evolution of it was than those simple words. So there's an interesting kind of parallelism, and they meet on the field of battle. You may remember the wonderful scene in which they meet and they tell each other's genealogies in completing ways, and the battle never actually takes place because anyway, Aeneas gets swept away by his mother, who protects him, and but the story is told in Virgil's Aeneid, and of how he escaped the sacking of Troy by the Greeks and went on a long wandering journey that's like that journey of Odysseus, visiting a lot of the places in the Odyssey, finally to arrive in Italy, where he encounters a hostile population. And so the Aeneid, on the one hand, reflects the Odyssey, and the other hand, the Iliad. When he gets there, he has a lot of, he's called upon to be a warrior, and the book ends with a scene in which Aeneas kills the enemy of the opposing native peoples who are against his settling there because of what it means for their future, according to prophecy. But he's a hero. It's also true that in the last 20 or 30 years, archaeologists have found in northern Italy, not far from, I'm not totally sure where the place is. I think it might be Latium, which is the region around Rome, or someplace north of it, where there have been traces found of heroic cult of Aeneas, just like hero cult in ancient Greece. So certainly something even predictable. This is why would you adopt this person to be your founding hero unless there was a long tradition behind him, given that Virgil didn't invent this out of nothing, okay? So, the culture of Rome and the culture of Greece are certainly historically related and culturally related. They both come from the same source, that is, they're both Indo-Europeans, but the Romans adopted the arts, learned the arts of civilization, let's say, from the Greeks, and their language in its earliest manifestation has Greek words in it there. The pantheon of Roman gods was affected by the way the gods work in the Olympian view that's portrayed in the Homeric poems, including names like the god Apollo, which is a Greek name, is also a Roman god, and so forth. So, and there were a lot of local, we can also say that there were local religious beings who were sort of leveled out of Roman religion because they were didn't fit in, so to speak, into the pantheon as it was reinterpreted by the Romans in terms of the Greek pantheon. But this is something like the relationship between Americans and the British, from whom they are descended. It's contested and appreciative, but also competitive. And so, but the character of Roman civilization, I think, can't be encapsulated in one word. But if you look at Aeneas, you have a very different kind of figure than Achilles and Hector. Excuse me. And I think it reflects certain essential themes about Roman civilization, the kind of hero that he is. And he's opposed in the text of Virgil to the Greek heroes. Achilles is portrayed in a very negative light in the Aeneid. And Aeneas is a person with who's stoic, okay, I think in the literal and in the sort of conventional sense of stoicism. That is, he's a person who does not betray his emotions. And he suffers inside, and we hear about how he suffers because the narrator knows what's going on in his mind. But he's a person of great dignity and kind of charismatic status, but he has lots of trouble dealing with people who are emotional. Like he has this encounter with a Carthaginian queen, Dido. We all know maybe about her by name, and he comes off rather poorly from this encounter because he's not a person who can deal with his own sexuality, okay, which he's the son of the goddess in Latin Roman terms, it's Venus. And so he doesn't has very uneasy encounters with his mother as well. So I don't want to spoil the story, but you shouldn't be put off by the fact that lots of people know that his major virtue, as described in the poems, rather, is the Latin word for it is pietas, P-I-E-T-A-S, which gives us the word piety in English, but also the word pity. And it doesn't mean either of those things. It has to do with the opposite of being a victim of extreme emotions. It means being in control of oneself and maintaining the dignity that is appropriate to your destiny and your genealogy and your status in the world. To sum it up in some kind of, there's a lot more that could be said. But it's not about being tied to other people, he's a hero whose story is about losing those who are nearest and dearest to him, and being more increasingly alone in life, instead of someone whose best friend dies and whom he avenges. Okay, so this is a very different kind of person. So these are, in terms of the psychology of it, and Roman literature is more psychologically oriented in direct ways than Greek. It's in that way responding to, after all, this is a poem that goes back to the 1st century BCE and AD. A lot of things have changed in the world, and Greek culture also has changed. So it has more to do with Alexandrian Greek literature than Homeric literature, although that's there in the background. So Alexandrian Greek poetry is much more refined, much more subtle, and much more interested in different concepts of what the hero could be than the older ones. So it's a very interesting trajectory. But you should also, just briefly to look forward to one other part of this, that his role in the Roman Empire is very important, because the emperors themselves are have a kind of are themselves objects of what you would recognize, I think, after the ancient hero in 24 hours project, you would recognize as hero cult. That is, the Roman emperors after death become divinized and become the object of worship. Okay, so this is a very important concept in Roman culture, and with a long life after Virgil. So these are big themes, and this course sets you up to understand and see how quite well how things have changed and how things are similar in a different in an altered but related cultural context. A very interesting thing to look at, in short. Hope that that's tempting and teasing you to learn more about it.
Thanks, Lenny. So the other question we were going to look at was related to colour, and we touched on colour when we were talking about vase paintings a little while ago. But this is more to do with sort of colour terms, colour perception. There seem to be relatively few colour terms in ancient Greek, certainly in Homeric poetry, and even so, augusta figures Prime Minister Gladstone looked at this issue.
Yes, yes.
And you know, were there fewer colours? Was there a lack of perception of colours, or did they describe things in different ways? What's the latest thinking about that?
So this is a very contested area. Okay, not just for reconstructing Greek and color terms, but understanding them in general across cultures. Okay, I think it's an accurate perception that you have a very limited color vocabulary, at least according to the standard translations. You have green and blue and red, and then we start to run into trouble. Okay, for example, the words that are sometimes translated as blonde is a color of a horse, and that's not going to work because the Greeks didn't have blonde horses. They're color terms that seem to describe hue instead of a piece of the spectrum, or reflectivity and stuff like that. This is a very difficult process. And I do have a reference to this is for anthropologists, and I think this is where the major work was done in the 80s and 90s, as in the group of anthropologists at Stanford University worked on this in cross-cultural terms. But now, in addition to further work in what's called linguistic anthropology, there's also the cognitive psychology and the neurology of colors, and testing for what parts of the brain are sensitive to colors, and trying to figure out in universal and cross-cultural terms what color is. It's all up in the air these days, in short. Okay, so I found what seems to be a reasonable collection just from, I've looked at this once before. I do own a book on Greek color terms, but it was from the 1980s, and I don't think it's what it has to say is valid. This book is called Color Categories in Thought and Language Attribution. Okay, Color Categories in Thought and Language Attribution, edited by C.L. Hardin, Hardin, Louisa Maffi, and published by Cambridge University Press in 1997. This isn't that recent, but it gives you a whole range of articles about the linguistic and anthropological approach to color, the neurobiological approach, and so forth. So I think you can see that we're dealing with a real problem. It's not just a matter of using philology to understand words. It's a matter of understanding what is transferable between different cultures about perception of colors as well as the naming of them. Not an easy problem. Okay, so I don't have a good answer for you. Okay, but I think it's a subject of research, and there aren't any good answers at the moment, I don't think. Okay.
Yeah. But as with all terms that we're looking at in this poetry, when we're looking at it in terms of the poetry, we would look at the context, where it's being used, and perhaps we can get some idea about maybe what emotional associations it has, even if we don't know what it looked like in the mind's eye of the people who were doing it.
For sure. I mean, if it's red and it's wine, you're in pretty good shape, okay? Because they didn't have white wine in antiquity, you know. And if it's describing the sea, well, then you're in more difficulty because the colors of the sea are changing. But and the poster talked about wine dark sea and oinops, and you pointed them at the discussion in the Cosmos Society, or formerly Hour 25, of these problems is a very good place to get a sense of the complexity of that issue, because it's a word that's used of the sea, but also of a cow, in not only in Homer, but in Linear B, the Linear B tablets, which are bureaucratic tablets. There's a cow named Oinops. Okay, so you know, wine dark doesn't work for cows so well. I don't know. Yeah, these are not simple problems, and we don't have a magic solution to all of them. But the one thing that I thought you dealt with quite importantly, that is important, is not to think the fact that Homer is blind. It's not like John Milton being blind. Okay, I think one can understand certain things about Paradise Lost because the poet couldn't see, but I don't think you can make any determinations about color blindness or inability to know what color vision was like from the Homeric poems, because they are the product of a tradition, not of an individual in any normal sense. Okay, so I think you don't have to worry about Homer being blind. The blindness is a part of the persona of the poet and an important thing to understand, but I don't think you have to understand it literally as being composed by somebody who couldn't see color. Okay, just to be really clear about it. That's not the problem. The problem is to understand across the space of time and language what's meant. What are the references of these terms? Okay.
And there are some quite visual descriptions,
Yes.
not just in terms of color, but also in terms of
radiance is a big thing in Homeric epic. Yeah, the color and the light that's reflected off of things is super important, right? Yeah, those things are important. So yeah, I mean, if you read these anthropological linguists talking about color, they can give you all sorts of different mind-opening ideas about how different societies perceive and describe colors. And even our color perception is so dependent upon, you know, in our society, we think we have good, stable words, but it's very dependent upon context and stuff like that. So this is even the science of color is a very unstable thing, right? It used to be that everything was red, green, and blue, but turns out you don't need to have three colors to generate the spectrum and stuff like that. This is beyond me, the physics of it, but you know, these things there's a lot of ongoing research. Yeah.
Absolutely. The world of color is very open to us. Very exciting.
Yes.
Good question. Okay, thanks very much.
Not at all. Thank you very much, Sarah.